Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. And Merry Christmas to all of you. My name is Amy Johnson, and I'll be your host for today's show. That would be episode 275 of the Canadiens Connection. I think it's an interesting coincidence that there's a 2 and a 5 in the episode number of the Christmas episode. The 25th.
Indeed.
The 275th. And you just heard him. I'm pleased, of course, to be joined in the studio by my co-host, the editor-in-chief, the founder and president of Rocket Sports, Mr. Christmas himself, Mr. Rick Stevens, the site editor of the Hockey News Montreal team site. How you doing today, sir?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Welcome back to the hosting chair.
Thank you so much.
Michael Spinella is traveling to spend time over the holidays with family.
Yes.
So we're very grateful that you're here with us on our Christmas show. And as others have said, the most wonderful time of the year.
Mm-hmm. You don't want me to sing that.
No. And today's Christmas show is going to be all about being positive. Positive perspectives of the Canadiens prospect pipeline.
Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the plosives.
Well, it's going to be a fun show today for sure. We're going to get you caught up on all of the latest Montreal Canadiens news and updates of how their week has gone, as well as get some roster news updated for you, injuries, potential trades, that type of thing. We've got a very fun winners and losers segment this week, which you don't want to miss. And of course, on our Habs prospect report, we've got lots of news because we've got not only, of course, the junior hockey to talk about, the AHL, but we've also got World Juniors to talk about. We've got Spengler Cup to talk about, Trois Rivières. We've just got we've got a lot. We've got a lot in the prospect report this week, including we're going to spend some time discussing a bit about a new goaltender who is within the organization now, Kasimir Kaskisuo, getting signed to a PTO by the Laval Rocket this week. So we're going to get you caught up on everything you need to know about that. And here are some quotes from him on the day that he signed that contract. And then get you caught up on some fun news and interesting news from around the hockey community before our second segment arrives, our big topic segment, where we evaluate the progress of Canadiens prospects with the Laval Rocket, specifically. And who better to do that with us than the one and only AHL guru, as you have so lovingly coined him. Mr. Patrick Williams himself is back for his second appearance here on the Canadiens Connection podcast, and we're going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to Canadiens prospects in the second segment. And then in the third segment, we've got some viewer comments. We've got a question for viewer comments from our YouTube channel, listener comments. We've got a question of the week for our listeners that we want to hear from you about. We have other content that we want to get you caught up on. So lots of fun stuff on tap for the show today.
What a great show.
Don't forget, as I just mentioned, we're going to talk about some of those viewer and listener comments that we've gotten. So this is, as you should know by now, an interactive podcast. And maybe you're just starting to find the Canadiens Connection podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or maybe you are just discovering it on YouTube podcasts and you're listening/watching on YouTube as well. Well, if you don't know already, this is truly an interactive podcast. We'd love to hear from you, questions, comments, feedback. And a lot of times we share some of those best messages from our loyal fans here on the show. So you can text us. Easy way to do it, of course, drop a comment on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. But easiest way is just to text us anytime. And that's through the Rocket Sports text line. You can do it at 585-3-ROCKET. Again, that's 585-3-ROCKET. And don't forget to follow this podcast at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you want to catch up on any episodes that you might have missed, just check out the archive at canadiensconnection.fm. All right, Rick, we had, there was 4 games on the slate this past week.
Busy week.
Starting last weekend with a visit from the New York Islanders. And, Canadians come out on top on that one, 5-3. That was a pretty good game.
Well, this was the final home game, in the Bell Center for the calendar year 2023. And ahead of the game, Marty St. Louis said he wanted a special effort from his team. He got that at least for 2 periods. Canadians dominated possession. They dominated shots, dominated high danger scoring chances. And after 2 periods had a 4-0 lead. Got a bit of a scare in the third period. Brock Nelson with a couple of goals early in the third. Bo Horvat added another for the Islanders. But the Canadians prevailed and gave their coach exactly what he demanded with a 5-3 win at home.
Absolutely. Then on Monday, they kicked off their 2-week Canadian Christmas road trip. I don't know why I say Canadian in there. Canadian C's, it's all C's. It's all the C's. Kicking off their 2-week Christmas road trip, but they started against a Canadian team in Winnipeg. Took this one to overtime, and it was the Barron brothers show. Which one gets the bragging rights at the holiday table this year? Well, it's going to be Mr. Justin Barron, who potted a very enthusiastic game-winning goal in extra minutes.
Yeah, in overtime, a power play goal in overtime, 1 minute into overtime, and that sealed the win for the Montreal Canadiens.
Game 2 on the road trip was another OT affair, except this time the Canadians only walked away with 1 point against the Minnesota Wild. Kirill Kaprizov having quite a night for himself, and he's the one that managed to get the game winner in OT.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. 4.9 seconds left. Cole Caulfield and there's been a lot of talk about Caulfield and his improved defensive game. Not in this case.
No.
He walked away from Kaprizov, who potted the game winner just right at the end of overtime.
And their final game before the Christmas break, a Friday 8:30 game in Chicago. Of course, Luke Richardson behind the bench, Connor Bedard on the ice. And the Canadians found themselves down 2-0 in this game early on, but then somehow turned it around, put up 5 unanswered goals, and walked away heading into the holiday with a 5-2 victory over the Chicago Blackhawks.
Listen to former Canadiens coach and now Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson, and he said that it was the Montreal Canadiens players who ramped up the battle level. They started winning battles in the second period, and he was disappointed that his team didn't have an answer for that, and the Canadiens walked away with the pre-Christmas win and a really solid week for them.
Absolutely. Even despite that loss against Minnesota, still walked away with a point. And so that's gotten them to 35 points on the season so far. That's 19th in the NHL with a 15-13-5 record. I don't think we likely would have predicted that's where they'd be sitting come Christmas time.
So now the projections have them looking at about an 82-point season. That means they have about it's projected, moneypuck.com is what we're looking at, a 12.7% chance of making the playoffs. And that's way up from, that still doesn't sound good, but it's way up from the 1 or 2% chance at the beginning of the season. I'll just add here that we know that American Thanksgiving is a bit of a milestone. Well, Christmas Eve is also a bit of a milestone in the NHL. Historically, teams who are in a playoff spot on December 24th have an 85% chance of making the playoffs. Means there's room for 15% of other teams to get in there. Maybe the Canadiens are one of those, but they're going to have to continue to have the kind of weeks that they just completed. Absolutely.
So if you missed any of that game action, or even throughout the holiday season, if you have travels and commitments and so forth, and you want to get caught up on everything that's going on with the Canadiens, if you can't follow along game to game necessarily, then be sure you've bookmarked the Hockey News Montreal team site. That is thn.com/Montreal, where you'll check out a weekly Habs notepad, Habs headlines, articles, featured articles, and of course our game day posts, both game previews and full game recaps around every game. And that'll keep you in the know about the Canadiens during the holiday season and all year long. In terms of roster news, it looks like Jordan Harris is getting awfully close to making his return. He was on the road trip this week, so it's inching closer and closer to a return to game action for the defenseman. Perhaps we will see him back on the ice with his teammates when they're back from Christmas break at the end of next week.
Yeah, the difficulty is that the Canadiens' defense is playing pretty well.
Yeah.
We know that with David Savard coming back, it was Gustav Lindstrom who has been a healthy scratch for the past few games. Not Jayden Struble, as many might have expected. Maybe you expected Struble to go back to the Laval Rocket, but he's been playing very well. We saw him score his first and second goal against the Chicago Blackhawks. Struble, he had his first penalty, and his first penalty happened to be a fight, which he won handily. And I don't think there's any question that Struble made the best save in that game.
My goodness.
Better than the two goaltenders in the game, standing in the crease when Caden Primo was down and out and made a spectacular save.
That's right.
Struble's fit right in, and Gustav Lindstrom, was a patch with all the injuries. Now, where is Jordan Harris going to go? We'll see what happens once the Canadiens resume their road trip after the Christmas break.
Speaking of another prospect, Emil Heineman made his NHL debut this week, which is pretty exciting. Out there letting the breeze through his hair, bucket lists out for his rookie lap. Pretty exciting for Emil Heineman to get to his NHL debut. In fact, on this week's Habs Hockey Report on our YouTube channel, I had listed out my top Christmas wish list items for the Montreal Canadiens, and one of them was that please make sure, Norlinder came up and he didn't get into a game, and so I didn't want that to happen for Heineman. I said get him into a game, and if it means you have to take Pizzetta out for that to happen, then so be it. But he needs to get into at least a game, and that's exactly what happened. That's who came out. Pizzetta sat, Heineman came in, got to realize his dream of getting his NHL debut.
So you got your Christmas wish already.
One of them. I have many.
I see. It was nice to see Heineman and Ullinen. Actually, they look really well together.
Yeah. They played on a line together in Laval. Yeah.
And unfortunately, less than 6 minutes for Heineman against Minnesota. That was ramped up a little more. I think it was closer to 9 minutes. Against Chicago. So nice to see him getting an opportunity. And you mentioned his rookie lap bucket list. Well, he got fined for that, but I'm sure it was well worth it.
You'd pay that any day.
I'm sure that somebody on the team paid that for him.
They better have. The goaltending rumor continues to swirl for the Montreal Canadiens. It's kind of been the story of the season, and apparently, according to Pierre Lebrun, both the Carolina Hurricanes and the New Jersey Devils have checked in with Kent Hughes about the availability of one Jake Allen. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. Yeah,
the trade freeze in effect. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so if this happens, either the movement to either of these teams, it's likely to happen in January. The other issue is that some of these teams are up against the cap, and the further you go along in the season, the more cap room you accumulate, so you might be able to take on a contract like Jake Allen. Jake Allen's been playing really well, and goals saved above expected. We heard that a lot with respect to Sam Montembeault. Jake Allen has taken, with respect to the Canadiens goaltenders, Jake Allen has taken over the mantle for the three Canadiens goaltenders. He's ranked 30th in the league, which maybe isn't what you want for your number one goaltender, but that's pretty good for a backup. Sam Montembeault is now ranked 33rd in the league in goals saved above expected, and Caden Primo is 41st in the league in that statistic.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see if this rumor goes anywhere. Something's got to give at some point. Something's got to give. All right, I promised it when we ran down the agenda for the show. We've got a very fun winners and losers segment this week, so let's get to it.
And now it's time for this week's winners and losers on the Canadiens Connection.
Spoiler alert. Santa Claus is this week's winner.
Well, of course. There can't be any losers. There can't be any losers this week.
Well, unless he's bringing coal to anybody. That's a bad scene. But yes, Santa Claus is this week's winner. Rick, you were the one that there was a very specific question that you wanted to ask for this week about the winners only, positive perspectives.
So I thought it'd be fun
Yeah.
to ask, what was your favorite hockey-themed Christmas present that you received? Because, that evokes good memories. And winner, you were a winner at Christmas when you got hockey stuff. And so I just thought that would be a good question for us both to answer.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say then that makes my winner my husband.
All right, then.
Because all of my hockey gifts really have come from him. And so I have to say, of all of them, I've had some really, really fun hockey-related gifts from hubby. But the probably my favorite one and the most memorable one is way back before he was my husband, when he was my boyfriend.
What?
When we were dating. He bought me my very first hockey jersey. My very first NHL sweater came courtesy of my then boyfriend. And it was a Flyers jersey, not an orange one. It's a black one. It's kind of the old school. It was the last iteration. I mean, this was a long time ago.
You're choking up.
I am, of course.
It's emotional. It's
so
emotional for you.
Excuse me. No, it's back before they went to that god-awful construction orange, when they still had a really nice black sweater with orange and white accents. It's a great sweater, and it was my very first one. So that is definitely my favorite hockey-themed Christmas present.
Well, that's a terrific hockey-themed Christmas present. And when I think back, the hockey jerseys, hockey jerseys were a part of Christmas. As I think back, getting Canadiens jerseys, I got a really nice Jets jersey as well. And I think of getting my dad a jersey, and in the nameplate, we put Zamboni, because he was always there to clean out the rink for us before we were on the backyard rinks. But I didn't pick, for my favorite, I didn't pick a jersey, a sweater. And I thought about, there was, when you get the rod hockey, the tabletop hockey sets, as a kid, those are the ideal Christmas gift. But I got a pair of molded skates. My brother and I both got Lang molded skates. And for us, it was the first time we had ever got a brand new pair of skates. We had always, the exchange thing and get your used skates. And that makes sense for, when you're
Little ones.
Yeah, for sure. So these were new skates, and that was a really big deal. They were really cold to wear outside, but no, that was terrific, and that was probably my favorite hockey-themed Christmas present.
Wow, very nice. I like it. And we're going to ask, well, I should just throw out the question of the week right now.
Why not?
Yeah. So the question of the week for all of you listening is, we want to know what your favorite hockey-themed Christmas present has been. It could be one that you got this year. Maybe you got an early Christmas present this year, or it could be one that you got a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, when you were a kid, whenever. What's your favorite hockey-themed Christmas present? Be sure to send us a text at 5853-ROCKET. Let us know. You can send us an email at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. You can drop us a comment on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, YouTube channel. Just let us know, what was your favorite hockey-themed Christmas present that you can recall. All right, we are going to switch gears now to the prospects, and we are going to pop into the Habs prospect report.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world. Bookmark thn.com/Montreal to follow our comprehensive coverage of Canadiens prospects.
So each week, we kind of kick this segment off by highlighting a Montreal Canadiens prospect, typically like outside the AHL, perhaps somebody playing either in Europe or playing in junior hockey. And so this year, it's someone who's playing in the Q, and that is Quebec Remparts goaltender Quentin Miller.
Yeah, and we remember the draft where the Montreal Canadiens selected three goaltenders. Quentin Miller was selected in the fourth round, 128th overall at this past draft. And when he was selected last, we remember, Quebec Remparts winning the Memorial Cup. And for that team, Quentin Miller was the backup. So limited action last season on a very good team. And he had an outstanding record as such. This year, Quebec Remparts not in that same situation. You go all in. And their team has been struggling a little bit. And Quentin Miller is learning to be that number one goaltender for that struggling team. His record is 11-13-1, 305 goals against, and a 901 save percentage. However, we've learned that Quebec, that the Quebec Remparts have been involved in a trade with the Rimouski Oceanic. Not been made
Official yet.
Not been made public yet.
Yeah.
That's right. Not sure what the reason for that is, but the Journal de Montréal reports that Quentin Miller will move to the Rimouski Oceanic on the 29th of December. And for their trouble, the Remparts are going to get a first and second round picks in 2025 from the Oceanic, and a player to be named later. And so why is this trade happening? Well, Quebec, not the same team they were last year. They went all in. They gave up a lot of draft picks. They want to restock the cupboard. The Rimouski Oceanic, are they thinking they're going to have a big year this year? Maybe not. However, the Oceanic it was announced that they'll be hosting the 2025 Memorial Cup. They'll have an entry as for being the host. So this is getting a good quality goaltender who's going to help you in the 2025 season. Really interesting is that that Miller is going to play one last game. Kind of odd. You don't want to typically. We've seen players held out of the lineups when there was a trade pending for risk of injury. However, that Quentin Miller is slated to play one last game for the Remparts against the Sherbrooke Phoenix on December 28th. So, I mean,
odd.
Trades in junior hockey are always fun. I've said that. Here's one that pay attention when you hear it. When you hear it announced, you'll say you heard it on the Canadiens Connection first, and we tip the cap to Journal de Montréal for digging this information.
Absolutely. In other prospect action, the World Junior Championships is blink right around the corner. Yes, it's the Christmas episode. That means it's the Boxing Day World Junior Championship last show before that starts, and prelim action has actually already begun for the World Juniors. So who is playing? Which prospects can we be keeping an eye on for the World Juniors this year? 'Tis the most wonderful time of the year. It's just a tremendously fun tournament to watch. Well, for Team Canada, there's none other than Owen Beck, and I think that he is going to, in his return to Team Canada, he's taking on quite a different look this year than he did last year, and I expect him to make some pretty leave a pretty big stamp on this team.
In the pre-competition games, Owen Beck has been centering the third line with Nate Danielson, the Detroit prospect, and Owen Allard. Against Switzerland, the Canadiens won that game. The Team Canada won that game 6-3. Owen Beck had 2 goals to lead Team Canada. I think that it's his leadership that's going to certainly help this Team Canada as they go through the competition.
Absolutely. The United States, and I am completely unbiased in saying they have a stacked team this year.
Mm-hmm.
They are the favorites for a lot of people. And Lane Hudson and Jacob Fowler both playing for Team USA this year. And of course, Lane Hudson is going to be a remarkable player to watch. And the big question is, what is the goaltending distribution going to look like between Fowler and Trey Augustine?
Yeah, interesting that as we're recording, there's a pre-competition game on now, the U.S. versus Canada, and Jacob Fowler got the start in that game. The two of them, Trey Augustine and Jacob Fowler, as we mentioned last week, are roommates through this. They see this as healthy competition, and let's hope that we see a lot of Jacob Fowler, who's had a tremendous season so far in Boston.
For Slovakia, Filip Mešar making that team, and he's actually had a little bit of additionally fun news this week.
He's been named the alternate captain for the Slovakian squad. So that's confirmation of his leadership abilities with the Slovakian team. Of course, we talked about him also having a terrific season with Kitchener. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be fun. And the Hockey News has put out a survey. Also, the site editor, not only for the Canadiens, but for the QMJHL, as we've said many times. And so I was involved in a survey about what we think, the predictions, what I think is going to happen. I have the U.S. taking gold, Sweden silver, and Canada in the bronze position. Lane Hudson, beautiful stretch pass in the game, Canada versus U.S., being the tournament MVP and the best defenseman. You have so many choices for the forwards. Macklin Celebrini, we're pleased that the incident in that game versus Switzerland, he didn't receive any further disciplinary action. Cutter Gauthier for the U.S. team, Lataramaki for Sweden, they're all going to be good. And let's see. There's some really good goaltenders at the tournament as well. We mentioned Fowler, Trey Augustine, Adam Gajan for Slovakia, Michael Rabel for the Czechs. So this is going to be a terrific tournament. All the action starting on Boxing Day.
Absolutely. On Boxing Day, what can we look forward to? Finland taking on Team Canada. The Slovaks taking on Czechia, which will be pretty fun, and the USA facing off against Norway on Boxing Day. So I know what I'll be doing on December 26th.
The Swedes also play that day, but the games you listed are the ones that include the Montreal Canadiens prospects.
Yes, that's true. Speaking of European tournament action, the 2023 Spengler Cup is going to get underway, and Team Canada announced their roster. Just one or two familiar names on it.
Yeah, there is. There's a real Canadiens connection here. And,
yes.
First, Bruce Boudreau is going to be the head coach. That's his first international coaching assignment. And who's the GM? Thornton, I think, is which is fascinating. But for Canadiens connections, Eric Jelena played for Laval. Nathan Beaulieu playing for the Montreal Canadiens, and we know is playing with David Reinbacher currently. Dan Audette, the small sniper, Jordy Ben, and Nicolas Baudin, who is currently playing with the Laval Rocket.
That's right. So plenty of familiar names on that roster as they get set to start the Spengler Cup tournament. Speaking of the Laval Rocket, they've had a week at both ends of the spectrum, let me tell you. Last Saturday, they wrapped up their... that was the second game. They were in the middle of their last road trip before the Christmas break, visiting the league-leading Hershey Bears, the defending Calder Cup champions, who have not slowed down one bit since they won the Cup back in June. And with Straussman in net, it was an absolute drubbing. Hershey winning that one 7-1. It wasn't even close. It never was close. It was absolutely a game that if you watched it, I'm sorry, you should just forget it.
Interesting for me is Straussman looked awful, and he played the entire game.
Yeah.
So Jeff Will wasn't anxious to sub in Jakub Dobas, and that's fine. You protect the prospect, the player who is not part of your future of your organization is allowed to struggle in the game, and that's what happened.
That's right. Well, and it was also because Dobas had played the night before, putting up 42 saves in a 45-shot game, and then he got the start and won that game. I should mention that was his second consecutive win. And so then he started Wednesday night's game in Syracuse, backstopping the Laval Rocket to a third consecutive win with him in the crease, winning that one against Joël Bouchard's team 3-2.
Very nice.
And then they came back home for Friday night, one last home game before the Christmas break with the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton Penguins in town. And again with Dobes in net. His fourth consecutive victory in starts, 5-2, same score that the Canadiens put up against Chicago on the same night. Arbor Jacki scoring his first AHL goal. It came on the power play. It was a really nice snipe from the high slot. And Sean Farrell was back in the lineup after injury, getting a goal, an assist, and was +3 on the night. So really ended up being a perfect week Wednesday, Friday for Laval. And they put that 7-1 loss last Saturday firmly in the rearview mirror.
And Sean Farrell wearing the helmet after the game, awarded by his teammates and the coach. They really appreciated having him back in the lineup.
That's right. In addition to that, Elias Anderson also returned to the lineup from injury on Friday night. He had been out even longer than Sean Farrell. So those are two key pieces to the forward core that JFL gets back just before Christmas. And they'll certainly be needed because when they come back from their break next week, they have their very first 3-3 of the season. And so they're going to need all the firepower they can get. That leaves Laval with a current record of 9-13-3-2. That is a .426 points percentage. So it's still not pretty. They are still sitting 27th in the AHL. There is still a lot of work to do, but they are, with the way the playoff points are distributed or qualifying is distributed in the AHL, if they can continue this, there is a chance that they could make the postseason. Mm-hmm. But we'll just have to see how all of that shakes out. They play on Thursday at Belleville, and then they come home for Syracuse. They face off against Syracuse again on Friday night. That'll be Bouchard's first visit back to Laval, and so that'll be an interesting game for sure.
Will he wear a cape?
I don't know. I really don't know. The Trois-Rivières Lions in the ECHL not faring as well. In fact, I believe they lost all 3 of their games last week, losing 4-1 to the Norfolk Admirals, lost in overtime 2-1 to the Adirondack Thunder, and then 3-1 on Friday night. Another loss there.
Yeah, Worcester
against Worcester.
I said it last week. The bottom's just dropped out.
It really has.
They're now 13-1, and have dropped to 7th place in the Eastern Conference. They've lost 6 straight games. And I said it last week. The offense has dried up. They have a real problem scoring goals. As you listen to what the scores you just read, they scored 3 goals the entire week. They cannot score goals. That's not all. There's a couple of players that were called up to AHL teams, both the Laval Rocket and others. That's not all. The problem of those players missing. They're just the offense is just not there.
Not at all. Also should mention, in addition to, of course, we have our Laval Rocket coverage, and Chris G also does a Trois Rivières ECHL notepad each week as well. But if you are looking for information about the Q, then you should also be sure to check out our Hockey News QMJHL site. That's at thn.com/QMJHL. It's your most excellent English language coverage of the Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League.
Well said.
And, of course, all of our Canadiens prospects coverage, the Laval Rocket, the Trois Rivières Lions. You can find that at thn.com/Montreal. So be sure you're always checking that out. So I mentioned Straussman, absolutely, that loss of his, it's been since the beginning of, I want to say November 11th was the last time Straussman won a game. It's been quite a stretch for him in his last starts, and he has struggled mightily. And I think that, as I mentioned on Tuesday's episode of the Rocket Hockey Report on our YouTube channel, I think that Saturday game was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, because Monday morning we saw an announcement that a PTO had been signed for a goaltender in Laval, and that is veteran goaltender Kasimir Kaskisuo. If you want to learn all about who Kaskisuo is, a little bit about his career, what kind of goaltender he is, I invite you to go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/allhabs, and check out this week's episode of the Rocket Hockey Report. Patrick Williams joined me on that show, bringing his insight from the AHL and his knowledge of Kaskisuo. We talked in depth about him. Laval fans might find that name familiar because he did play for the Toronto Marlies for a couple of years. And it's going to be an interesting thing now, Rick, to see. Kaskisuo is someone, he's played the last 2 seasons for Leksands in the Swedish Hockey League. He has not played this season. So it's going to be an interesting thing. I think it's a good thing to get a little bit of pressure off Jakub Dobiš, but we'll see how all of this kind of shakes out with now there's 3 goaltenders in Montreal and there's 3 goaltenders in Laval.
Why not?
There's goaltenders aplenty.
The difference, Kaskisuo is a veteran, 30 years old, and does have experience in a number of leagues, whether it's AHL, ECHL, and abroad, as you mentioned, in the SHL. He came from Finland, but played his junior hockey for the University of Minnesota Duluth and was pretty good for UMD, and has settled in the Minnesota area. So he's a bit of a fascinating guy. I found it interesting. Straussman, we always wondered why in the world would the Canadiens have signed Straussman. But Straussman seemed to be a bit of a go-between between the ECHL and the AHL, but a smaller goaltender, which is unusual for the Canadiens organization to sign at 6 foot. Even Kaskisuo is actually 6'3", and that fits that unofficial rule that we've been told that the Canadiens have about goaltenders. Hopefully he can better fill the net than Strauss-Mann has.
Absolutely. He did not. He joined the team in Syracuse to practice with them on Tuesday. Did not dress for their game on Wednesday, and then returned back to Laval with them, practiced, and dressed as Jakub Dobeš's backup for Friday night's game. So I imagine in their 3-3 that they're going to play next week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday afternoon, that we will see him get into a game in that stretch and kind of see what happens.
Interesting that they're not easing him in necessarily, especially a guy who has not yet played this season, has not played for about 9 months, in as the backup and probably looking to get him into games after Christmas.
I would imagine so. We mentioned he does have some experience. He's quite a character. I think this is going to be a fun. I think fans are going to have some fun with Kasimir Kaskisuo being part of the Laval Rocket. He is not only a goaltender, but he is a self-described content creator as well. He has a very popular YouTube channel, over 60,000 subscribers. He is basically a vlogger. He gives people a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to be a professional goaltender, his training routines, his travel, what gear he uses, how he works out, how he trains, and glimpses of his family, his wife and his daughter, and so on and so forth. So he's very popular on social media. He's got, Rick, I believe you told me this morning, he's got a very popular TikTok account as well and an Instagram account. So
he's
this
everywhere.
is going to be interesting.
But I've heard that name before. And yes, he played for the Marlies, but more recently, that name has been in the news. And my goodness.
Well, it was playoffs with Lexans. I believe it was last year in the spring.
It was in March. Yeah,
it was in March. And they lost in overtime in a game he was playing in. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't thinking.
3 unanswered goals.
He was very frustrated as soon as they lost the game. Very angry, very frustrated. Believed there were 2 penalties two calls that the refs should have made that would have not led to the winning goal against him and his team. And that didn't happen. And so as soon as that goal happened, before he skated off the ice, he picked up his water bottle off of his net and chucked it clear across, practically over to the dot, to the face-off circle, and smacked a ref in the back with his water bottle.
Yeah. It was a great,
it's a great
arm.
throw.
Yeah. Yeah, a great arm. And
got suspended for that.
Got suspended.
Got suspended for that.
All forms of improper body contact against a referee or other official must be punished. So he was, it happened just at the end of Lexan's regular season. So he was suspended for the final 3 regular season games and first 2 playoff matchups. Now he's, at the time, was the number 2 goaltender, so it didn't really...
It didn't affect them too much.
But yes, he was unable to control his temper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and of course, then the very next vlog entry that he made on his YouTube channel,
about it.
He was like, okay, I guess I know you've all seen it, and so I guess we're going to have to talk about it. So here's what he had to say, probably a few days or maybe a week or so after the infamous water bottle throwing incident.
Obviously, everything that led into that big moment was overtime, and they have a line change. The guy who's coming off the ice is still on the ice when the guy who jumps on plays the puck. I think he even grabs the puck, so it would have been too many men. He goes over the blue line. It should have been offside. And that's the guy who comes down and breakaway scores. Letting a goal, lose the game, should have been an offside, should have been too many men. So a lot of things that kind of happened and then boiled over. Obviously, I should have never done that, and it's embarrassing, and it's something that obviously should never happen.
Yeah, he said it was a learning moment, but everything built up. He had given up a soft goal. It was in overtime. There should have been offside, too many men, and he just lost it at that point.
And he promises it'll never happen again.
Promises, yes, it would never happen again. Although he said that in the dressing room, his teammates found it quite hilarious.
Yeah, they did. And so I'm sure that one went down in infamy. In the dressing room.
I wonder why he sat out for the last 9 months.
So, okay. He's obviously a passionate, emotional goaltender, and sometimes that works for you. Sometimes it works against you. But I think having a big personality like that with some really decent experience, and who has played in the AHL, and we're going to hear him talk about this in a few moments, has played in the North Division, has played against the Laval Rocket. This is a good thing. As long as he can control that temper, this could be a good thing for not only just to steady the ship for Laval, but really specifically for Jakub Dobeš, somebody that can help take some of the pressure off of Dobeš, let Dobeš just kind of relax and concentrate on what he needs to concentrate on. What I love is that, he is a character. He's obviously got a big personality. And so when his most recent vlog post on YouTube was after he had signed this PTO with Laval. So we got to see his reaction with his family and his excitement about the fact that he had signed a professional tryout with an American Hockey League team. And so first we're going to hear from him. This is him telling his daughter at her 5th birthday party that he's got some pretty big news.
Fox, I got to tell you something. Even though it's your birthday, Daddy got a present today. I got a team. I'm going to go play hockey. Can you say go Rocket?
Go Rocket!
Woo! We're ready to go. Let's go.
Yay!
Woo!
We're going
I gotta leave today though.
We're going to Canada. Oh,
Back to Canada. Go hockey! We did it. The wait paid off. It's a Christmas miracle.
A Christmas miracle. That is a great moment for him to share. His daughter Fox, his wife Whitney. And they're all obviously very excited. As he said, they've been waiting for this kind of news for a long time. In the video, he talks about that things had started to happen over the last week or two. He had an offer that he considered a good opportunity from a Swedish team. He had a good offer from a Finnish team, and they wanted a quick answer. He said there was a safety net offer from an ECHL team, and then the AHL offer came through from the Laval Rocket, and he said that was plan A for him.
Absolutely. And as I say, I speculate that it was after that Hershey game on Saturday. I have a feeling that's when Laval started to take a look and probably started making those phone calls. And so, as we mentioned, he's familiar with Laval. He's played against them, and his excitement about joining this team specifically was very evident in this video that he posted.
Oh man, I'm fired up. I'm so fired up. And obviously Laval is in the North Division, where I played a couple years for Toronto. So I'm already looking forward to the first game against Toronto. I think the first one won't be until February sometime, but looking forward to that one already. Got it circled around in the calendar. But stoked to go in division where I was an all-star in 2020 and just comfortable with, and just coming back from Europe and going back to somewhere where I'm comfortable.
He's comfortable. He's fired up. And listen, a busy day for him. As you said, his daughter's 5th birthday, but got the call from his agent and talked to the Rocket. And He quickly packed and headed to the airport. I think he's based in Minnesota, headed to Washington and then to Syracuse. But took the time to look at the Rockets' schedule and where are those Marlies? When we're going to face the Marlies? And he circled that date in February already.
If he sticks around that long enough to get to that point, the Marlies are a divisional opponent, and divisional opponents usually play each other in the AHL 10 to 12 times, and they haven't played the Marlies very much at all yet. So if he's able to stick around, he's going to see an awful lot of the Marlies in February and March and April. So it could be very exciting for all of that. So welcome to Kasimir Kaskisuo. It's a new chapter. It's a new adventure. We'll see how all of this works out, and it's going to be pretty fun to follow along with. All right, before we get to our second segment, because we're going to talk about Kaskisuo and Dobesh and the goaltending and some prospects and whatnot, a bit more coming up here in the second segment when Patrick Williams joins us here in the studio. But before we get there, just a few big pieces of news and notes from around the hockey world. Starting in the NHL, you mentioned this briefly a few minutes ago, Rick, but the NHL's holiday freeze is now officially in effect. Teams cannot trade or waive players until December 28th now. So wherever you're at, you're at.
Yeah, there's some emergency
exceptions
there, but we're not going to see any trades until after that, and maybe into the new year.
That's right. An update out of Philadelphia news, but not necessarily about the Flyers themselves, more on the GM, Danny Briere, and his son. You'll remember Carson Briere had an incident earlier this year pushing a woman's, thinking that it was, hilarious to push a woman's wheelchair, empty wheelchair down the stairs in a Pennsylvania bar back in March. Well, Rick, he has his sentencing basically has come in finally.
And this happened in Erie County District Attorney Office. Carson has been given 15 months of probation. He applied for what's called an accelerated rehabilitative disposition. He was accepted. And that means that he goes through this program. He has 15 months of probation. If he successfully completes that, the misdemeanor charges that is misdemeanor mischief, I think, those charges will be dismissed and his record will be expunged. But this was a player who was playing for Mercyhurst and maybe had a bit of a future, and now that's certainly in jeopardy. And he's playing in Europe. Well, he's not playing currently, but he's listed on a team in Europe, in France, so he's likely to play in Europe next season.
That's right. Montreal news. Forbes has published their most valuable NHL teams list for the year for 2023. Rick, where do the Canadiens fall in terms of being a valuable NHL
just
franchise?
Filthy rich.
Yeah.
That's where they fall.
Really?
Just wickedly and filthily rich.
Okay. Great.
We knew this was coming because remember the little transaction Michael Andlauer made buying the Ottawa Senators, and to do that he had to sell his share of the Montreal Canadiens, and to know what the shares were worth, the Canadiens had to be valued. So we knew it was going to be over $2 billion that the franchise was valued at. Forbes listed the Canadiens having a value of $2.3 billion. That places them third in the NHL, behind the Rangers at 2.65 and behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, first overall at $2.8 billion. Revenue for the Canadiens, $265 million a year, $99 million operating revenue. And as we said, a bit of a bargain because the players' salaries have remained static the last few years. That's going to go up next year. But the Canadiens are doing all right. And part of that is because they have such a lucrative regional TV contract in both English and French. Canadians are doing fine.
And they're charging $200 a pop for Youppi to come by your...
That's just awful. It's just awful. Awful.
In Ottawa, DJ Smith out, fired. And who's the interim head coach? Dun, 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 dun. It's the return of Jacques Martin.
What was old is new again.
Yeah, and Daniel Alfredson also joining Martin's staff as an assistant coach.
Yeah, popular move in Ottawa,
Yeah.
obviously. Jacques Martin, is he made for the modern NHL? I don't know about that, but he's going to certainly fix up the Senators' defensive issues.
Yeah.
He'll have a go at that. Named interim head coach. We'll see what happens as the season goes along. But Michael Endlauer, who I had just mentioned, is putting his stamp on things in Ottawa.
Absolutely. Finally, just before we head to our break and get Patrick Williams settled into the studio, JFresh Hockey put out a fan survey. This is pretty fun. This is interesting. Who are the top 3 teams voted most hated by each NHL fan base? So take every NHL fan base and survey them on which 3 teams do you hate the most? That's pretty fun. And it's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, it's a great survey. The JFresh Hockey does work with Elite Prospects, the website. For the Montreal Canadiens, the most hated teams, this shouldn't be a surprise.
No.
The top 3 are the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1, Boston Bruins 2nd, and the Ottawa Senators 3rd. If you had a 4th option, the Nordique are still pretty hated in these parts. So interesting. You look at the Boston Bruins. The most hated teams are Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, and Florida Panthers, which is a bit odd.
Yeah.
Ottawa Senators, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Detroit Red Wings, and the Montreal Canadiens. And for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they hate the Boston Bruins, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Ottawa Senators.
Gee.
So lots
Everybody
of
loves
there.
everybody.
The only other place that the Canadiens showed up on most hated teams by the fan base is with respect to the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets hate the Golden Knights. They hate the Leafs. Everybody hates the Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens.
Wow.
That's I guess because the Canadiens fans fill their building
Probably.
when Montreal's in town.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Still to come, of course, we've got lots of things to catch you up on. And in our second segment, as we promised, Patrick Williams is going to be here with us. The 3 of us are going to have a really close look at the prospects for the Canadiens who are currently playing for the Laval Rocket, have spent time in Laval this year. And we're going to kind of get a barometer reading on how they are faring so far this year. Don't forget, leave us your comments at Rocket Sports on Twitter or on the Rocket Sports fan page on Facebook. And of course, you can always hit us up at 5853-ROCKET. And so we are going to discuss all of that and more. You're going to want to stay with us. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Bet the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook. You know, it's hockey season once again. And although I love using DraftKings Sportsbook to, enhance and make more fun my NFL watching week to week, it's even more fun when you get in on the action with the NHL and DraftKings Sportsbook. Whether it's daily fantasy, whether it's same game parlays that you're doing on Sportsbook, or whether you're just placing straight up money line bets, DraftKings Sportsbook makes it fun and easy for you to bet the action on the ice. So download the app now and use code THPN. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. Now that's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023. All rights reserved.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. I am Amy Johnson once again. You can find me, of course, on Twitter at FlyersRule. And with me in the studio is our president and founder of Rocket Sports and our site editor for the Hockey News Montreal team site at thn.com/Montreal. His name is Rick Stevens. You can follow him on Twitter at Rocket Sports. And of course, you can follow this podcast at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Visit our website at canadiensconnection.fm. And hey, just as a reminder, don't forget, if you haven't done so already, tap subscribe, whatever podcast player or app you are currently listening, or if you're watching on YouTube even. However you're currently enjoying this podcast, be sure that you have hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode every week. Rick, developing prospects is really a crucial component of the Montreal Canadiens rebuild. We know that they have put development as a priority for this season, needing to get the crop of really talented prospects that the Canadiens have in the organization, and particularly the ones that have already started their pro career, getting them ready to eventually make that jump to the NHL, and ensuring that they learn how to do that properly, transitioning to the NHL. And that's one of the ways that the Laval Rocket can really contribute to the goals of the organization.
And I think it's something that we have focused on for a very long time at Rocket Sports, seeing the importance, and back to the days of the Bulldogs and then the Ice Caps, and now the Laval Rocket. It's we have developed a real expertise, and the team that we have reporting on the Rocket this season and for the last few seasons, yourself. Managing that, Chris G in Laval, Chris G in the press box for all the home games, and then the expertise from the entire AHL of Patrick Williams. We cover it from every angle to help our fans, our listeners, our readers able to better follow what's going on with the Laval Rocket and the Montreal Canadiens prospects that are there.
That's right. So we are, with that name being said, we're going to invite Patrick Williams into the studio with us because we want to take a closer look at the progress of some of those AHL rookies, and even talk about one who's already been graduated to the NHL in Jayden Struble. I think Patrick and I are even going to pick out some prospect names out of the hat to talk a little bit more about in depth too. So let's get right to it. Well, it's an exciting day here at the Canadiens Connection podcast, not only because I get to be here in the guest hosting seat today, which I'm very happy to do, but also because the Press Zone gang is back together today, basically.
Yeah.
We've got Patrick Williams joining us for his newest appearance here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Patrick Williams, of course, the AHL writer for NHL.com, as well as the features writer for theAHL.com, and a very valued contributor here at Rocket Sports Media. Patrick, it's good to have you back on the show.
It's good to be back. The Angels have arrived too.
We've missed the Angels.
The AHL guru needs angels.
That's right. Particularly the week before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas
Merry
to
Christmas.
you.
Merry Christmas.
And yeah, it's glad to have you back on the show today, and we're going to get to talk about the Laval Rocket a bit with you today, which is going to be fun.
Lot to dissect there.
Yeah, and I think with the expert on the Laval Rocket, Amy Johnson, and with the expert on the AHL, Patrick Williams, it behooves me to just sit back and listen to your expertise and
Really?
maybe ask the questions and guide us through this a bit. Because, and listen, we talk about prospects a lot on the Canadiens Connection, with the Canadiens and the highly touted prospect pipeline. But sometimes it makes sense to take a segment like this and focus completely on Laval. And we're already more than a third of the way through the AHL season. Laval Rocket have played 26 games already, just 46 games remaining on their schedule. So I thought it would be a good time to take a look at some of the players that are in Laval, some of the players that have graduated from Laval, and look at get your perspective on how they're doing, how they're progressing, how they're developing. As we know, Laval hasn't had a terrific season, near the bottom of the standings in points percentage as we're recording this. But there has to be some good news. There has to be some development. There has to be some excitement. So we brought you here for the excitement. First of all, and I'll get you both to jump in on this. I picked out a forward, a defenseman, and a goaltender prospects, all, and really their first season with Laval. And I wondered if you'd like to talk about Jakob Dobas in goal, Logan Mailloux on defense, and Joshua Waugh on forward. And
Sure.
let me start with Patrick.
Okay. Who do you want to go with? Dobas first?
Let's start with the goaltending first. Given that I have a preference, an affinity towards goaltenders.
Understood. So Dobas, this is a difficult one because and Amy and I we had touched on this a little bit. It goes back, I think, to how the team was constructed this past summer, right? And the traditional setup for an AHL team, and really a depth chart for an entire NHL operation is obviously you have your two goalies up top. Your number 3 is usually a good, solid, proven veteran guy, somebody that can kind of go up and down between the big team when needed if there's an injury, and then when they're in the AHL, they could be a dependable number 1. And then you put the prospect kind of in that number 4 slot, in which case that would be Dobas, a player that showed a lot of potential past 2 years at Ohio State. Came out with some real optimism. Instead, what happened with Laval was Dobas was kind of put into that number 3 slot. Number 4 was Strauss-Mann, who was also unproven at the AHL level, and the two of them were kind of thrown, I would say, in some ways, thrown to the wolves. A little bit of a sink or swim setup, which is more kind of an old school way of doing things, maybe from 10, 15 years ago. Not a fan of it, I have to say. Particularly if you're going to do that, you need to have a deep club in front of you, right? Especially defensively, on your blue line. And, this is a team that, Brady and, Mailloux, who's a rookie. Struble was a rookie, right? Bisson was coming back. There wasn't a ton of veteran depth there that you would want if you're going to go with 2 young goalies. So as a result, man struggles. Dobas is put into that spot. I think he has to take on a heavier workload than maybe you would want for a young rookie goalie. And the numbers, obviously haven't been there for him. I think he's shown potential. You certainly have at times been able to see some things that you would like, but I just find, as with much of this team, it's hard to get a great barometer on things because there's not a lot of support around him, and that also works, conversely for the other, for defensemen and forwards. If the goaltending is struggling at times, it kind of complicates some issues up there. So it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg type of scenario. And for me though, I come back to it's all fine and well to have prospects and to certainly put them into top positions, but you really need to have that buffer zone and somebody that can kind of take the wheel a little bit when you hit some turbulence. And the first 2 months of pretty much any AHL team season are going to bring a lot of turbulence. Obviously, you're still getting your systems down. You got players that are turning pro, and it's just a lot to throw at one young goalie like Dobish.
I agree with everything Patrick just said. There, this is a hard one to gauge, and it starts with the fact that it's difficult is because it is the goaltending position. All of us here know, and I would imagine the bulk of our listeners, of course, over the years having listened to us now know that development at the goaltending position is the longest and most difficult position to develop in hockey. Mm-hmm. This is his rookie season. He is just 3 short months into his pro career. And he is a rookie goaltender on a significantly underperforming team that is struggling each and every night out of the gate. I think it was probably kind of the big red flag warning that opening night of the season, Laval ended up home. The season opener was also the home opener, and Jakub Dobiš got pulled from that game. That was not exactly how I'm sure they envisioned the season would start, and it kind of went downhill from there. But here's the good news. Jakub Dobiš is young. This is his rookie season, and for all intents and purposes, as Patrick said, he's had way too much pressure and responsibility placed on his shoulders as a rookie goaltender. He's there. This should be the season that he learns the pro game, learns the AHL, and starts to work on the small details of his game to help him grow. He should be more of an observer, I'll say an active observer, because he still needs the starts, but not to have the pressure to try to save the team each and every night. Even though he's been pulled a few times, a lot of those times it's not necessarily his fault. It's complete defensive breakdowns in front of him on a lot of those nights. He has shown really good flashes of talent, of natural skill. He has got size, which he is just going to continue to fill out that frame, and he takes up a lot of the net. And the really encouraging part is that now that Strauss-Mann has struggled, unfortunately, to the point that they've brought in Kasimir Kaskisuo as another goaltending option, because Strauss-Mann has lost his last 9 starts. Strauss-Mann has lost. On the flip side of that, they've started to depend on Jakub Dobiš even more. I mean, 2 weeks ago, they started Jakub Dobiš on a Friday night and started him again at 3:00 the next day for a matinee game in the afternoon. And what happened? Well, he took them to the shootout on that Friday night, and although they lost, he did get them to the shootout. Turned around less than 24 hours later and won that 3:00 matinee game on Saturday. Then he got the next start, and that was a win. That was against the Lehigh Valley Phantoms last Friday. He was the only reason they won that game. He stopped 42 of 45 shots, and if it had not been for him, the Phantoms would have absolutely steamrolled the Laval Rocket. And then in his next start, which was this past Wednesday night in Syracuse, he won again. So he has won 3 consecutive starts most recently, and the 4th one, he took them to a shootout. So he's putting the pieces together, and I think if he gets a little bit of relief and gets a little bit of pressure off of him and a little bit of responsibility off of his shoulders, I think he can really start to build on that.
So just before we leave Jakub Dobiš, one more point, and we said that Laval has played 26 games. They've only won 8 games. And if you look at Jakub Dobiš, maybe his goals against and his save percentage don't look pretty. But of those 8 games that Laval has won, Jakub Dobiš has 6 wins. Strauss-Mann just 2.
Yep.
And over the last 2 weeks, as you said, he's had some strong performance. Win or lose, he's had some very strong performances. You said he's gotten lifted. I think, in my opinion, JF Wool's been a little quicker on the trigger to pull Dobush than Strauss-Mann, and maybe that's because you don't want to hurt the young player's confidence. But just before we leave him, I think this was something, Amy, that you touched on the Rocket Hockey Report. It's just the attitude of Jakub Dobush. His attitude is, give me the tough assignments, put me in the net. And he said something, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something about, I'd rather be in the net and lose 6-5 and have a really tough assignment than have an easy night and get a 2-0 shutout.
He has said he has said something similar to that a few times. There was one occasion where he said, I would rather face 4 breakaways in a game and give up the goal on 3 of them instead of making 4 really easy saves because I haven't learned anything.
Yeah.
So he wants to be challenged. He wants to learn lessons the hard way. And I think that he really has a mature outlook on growing his game in that fashion.
Okay. Let's move to, Patrick referred to the defense and a young defense, a rookie, Logan Mailloux. And Amy, why don't you take this one first?
And I know we were kind of sort of categorizing them as you suggested. And for Dobush, I'm going to say it's too early to tell for him just because he is so young. For Mailloux, I'm going to say Mailloux is on track. And Mailloux was pretty dynamic when he was playing in junior hockey, and he's continued the scoring touch that he has. That is probably the most successful part of his game right now, aside from his size and his physicality. He also is a tremendous playmaker and can score. Where Logan Mailloux, in my opinion, needs to work on his game is in his own zone. He needs to work on the defensive part of the game. It's still a long ways to go. But I think that from what we've seen from Logan Mailloux, he plays a mature game. We've seen that when he came to camp and whatnot, that he looked like a man at camp. He wasn't looking like a rookie necessarily. And he's continued that in the AHL. He's consistently now on the top pairing. He's paired since Jackie's been sent down. He's been paired with Arbor Jackie on the top pairing. And he's just a solid presence. He just needs to work. He's got a little bit of defensive liability. He needs to shore some things up, but those are definitely teachable things. And I think he's absolutely on track for an NHL appearance at some point in the not so distant future.
A tough couple of blue liners in Logan Mailloux and Arbor Jackie for the opposition to face. You mentioned about his offensive output. He's got 14 points over those 26 games, but 64 shots on goal, just behind Joshua Waugh and Brandon Gignac. So he has certainly adapted to the offensive side of the AHL game. Patrick, what have you seen from Logan Mailloux?
Yeah, a word Amy used really jumped out, and that was teachable. And there's another part of him that you can't teach, which is the fact he's 6'3", 220.
That's right.
So between kind of his natural given talents and physical makeup, and then obviously being teachable, those are 2 pretty good building blocks for any young prospect to work with. It's not necessarily that you have to be 6'3", 220, but to have those physical gifts, whatever they may be, are always great starting points. Obviously, they're not in and of themselves enough, but they're building blocks. And I think for the thing I'm encouraged about with him, and I like this for young players, is he's getting some of that success early, in terms of putting up points and getting to do what kind of has gotten him to this point. I think sometimes for players when they come into this league and they're not able to do what they've always done, that can really, really start to kind of play on their mind. And it makes putting together all the other parts of the game that much more difficult. If you're seeing him get that positive reinforcement by being able to play his own game, I think it creates a good foundation there to okay, now we need to whatever the case may be for any player, we need to work on A, B, and C. So I think it helps sell the message. I think both from the coaching staff and also to the player, to his own self, that okay, I can still do what I've always done. You don't want to change players and try to make them into something they're not, but you also want to augment what they already do have and build out their game so that eventually it gets to an NHL level that he'll need. I agree with you. I think we'll see him at some point up with the Habs getting an opportunity.
So our entirely too simplistic rating on track to the NHL, jury's out, too soon to tell, or not going to happen. I think everybody agrees that Logan Mailloux is on track and is progressing well in his first pro season. Now the prospect that there's been so much excitement about, Joshua Waugh, and so many, and for good reason. I mean, we saw Joshua Waugh in the top 10 in AHL scoring very early in the season, and at that point there was calls, bring him up, put him on the top line. Let's see what he can do with Caulfield and Suzuki. And I think wisely, and that was before he had even got to experience a road trip, got to experience some tough matchups. So wisely, and obviously, I think Joshua Waugh has remained and is going to spend, I think, unless there's some severe injury problems, the majority of the season in Laval, and that's a good thing. But Patrick, talk about the up and downs of the season for for Joshua Waugh and how he's adapting.
Yeah, so I've spoken with him a couple times, and I think first off, he's very self-aware, which I love for a young player, because a lot of them, frankly, are not, and a lot of them do have that belief that I should already be in the NHL, and for all the noise and hype around him, I think he's been able to block a lot of that out. The other thing that really stood out to me was he was talking about his time in junior, right? And midway, I think through his second year in junior, it was the pandemic year, so obviously a little chaotic. But he was with St. John in the queue, traded to Sherbrooke. That put him in an opportunity to work with Stefan Julien, the head coach there, who's obviously had some time with Hockey Canada. Very successful coach in his own right. He's now with the Grand Rapids Griffins as an assistant, and is well on track, I think, to be a head coach at some point in this league. Julien really made him kind of really used a lot of tough love with Joshua Waugh, in terms of his fitness, conditioning, obviously the talent's there, but sort of all that other stuff was not there. He was getting by just on his natural given ability, which is fine in junior, right? That can take you pretty far, right? But that's not going to be nearly enough. Certainly at the AHL level, never mind the NHL level. And I think that, at least partially was the reason he fell a little bit in the draft from what you might expect. Huge year in junior, obviously coming in the past 2 years. He played actually with Xavier Perrant, who was the captain with the Phoenix there, and is now with Utica. Very Perrant is very intense, very kind of undersized type player, guy that's had to kind of scrap and really get his earn everything he's gotten. So I think he was a good influence for Waugh. And, Waugh, again, these players just have to mature. I mean, Waugh only turned 20 this past summer, and I think again we often forget how young some of these players are that we're dealing with. That like, hey, just like any 19-year-old kid, like maturity takes time, and it is a path toward learning what you have to do to succeed in not just even the pro hockey world, just sort of any adult environment you're in. And so I think Waugh's done that. And, he's had a great start to the year points wise. I think he's been, all things considered, a relative bright spot, given all the difficulties in Laval this season. I'll be encouraged to see where he can go. I think the biggest challenge for him will be what you mentioned, will be all that noise around him and, kind of continuing to be able to kind of shut that out and just, focus on what you have to do at the AHL level. It's not always the fun and glamorous stuff, but it's the stuff that's going to get you to the NHL and keep you there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree with all of that. I think in some ways he is, to use your categorization, Rick, I think in some ways he's on track, and in some ways it's too soon to tell, because he started the season like he was shot out of a cannon, as we know, shot to the top of Laval in terms of scoring, shot to the top of the league in terms of scoring. He was the league points leader for at least a week, if not longer, and he remains at the top within the top 4 or 5 in the league for rookie scoring, and so he started off exceptionally strongly at the beginning of the season. Then he disappeared for about 3 weeks, where he went on. He didn't have points, he wasn't scoring, and he kind of disappeared for a little while. He has since started to come back again within the last couple of weeks. He's had a couple of goals and some assists, so he's starting to warm up the production again. So I think really Joshua Waugh, we know that he's got the tools in the toolbox. I think at this level, it's going to come down to him finding how to make those tools be effective for him consistently night after night. And I think that's proving to be the adjustment for him, and it's going to take a little bit of time. So yeah, in one aspect, I think he's absolutely on track to where we would like to see him, but at the same time, without having the consistency of it, and it's only, again, 3 months into his rookie season as a pro hockey player, it's still just a little too soon to tell. Not so much whether or not he could eventually be in the NHL for any kind of responsibility, but how far out that might be.
Yeah, and I think he's the perfect example, Joshua Waugh is, and a reminder that development isn't linear. There's going to be spurts, there's going to be setbacks, and it's how the prospect handles those that goes a long way to how successful they'll be. Mm-hmm. We've talked about players in Laval. I'm thinking about players who have been promoted to Montreal already this season. Emil Heineman just made his NHL debut on Thursday night, and was because of an injury, a freak injury, where he collided with the referee. Only had a few games in Laval, so we'll leave him alone. We'll also leave Gustav Lindstrom alone. But I want to focus on Jayden Struble. He's a young player. He seemed to adapt to the AHL very quickly, and now he's thriving in protected minutes, but he's thriving in the NHL. I wonder if you both could talk a little bit about why he's been able to adapt, why he's been so successful. And Amy, I'll let you go first.
I've been really pleased to see how quickly Struble has adapted. When he came in with Laval last season, he caught attention at that point, showing you could tell this was kind of a defenseman of a different caliber than compared to what they had. And to start this year, he was absolutely, hands down, the Laval Rocket's best defenseman on most nights to start the season. And so I was pleased to see him get a call up. I was even happier to see that when he did get called up, when he did make his debut, and in the games that he's played, he has fit right in like he's kind of always been there. he hasn't looked out of place. He looks comfortable. He looks confident. He has that, so, you hear it and you see it in his post game and even pre-game availabilities with the media. He's got that swagger. He's got, not arrogant, but confident, and just, he knows what he needs to work on, but you can tell that he is self-assured that he can get there. And even this past Thursday on our YouTube channel on my latest Habs hockey report, I had a Habs wish list for Christmas, and one of my topics was I hope Jayden Struble gets an extended stay, because I'd like to see I hope he gets a larger sample size so that we can really kind of see what his current ceiling is, so that when he goes back, if he goes back to Laval, he has a very specific target to work on to get himself back to the NHL again.
Well, it's going to be interesting. David Savard has come back. That's displaced Gustav Lindstrom, and not Jayden Struble. He stayed in the lineup, and Jordan Harris is due to come back sometime soon. So what is it, Patrick? What is it about this player? And that's not to say that he may not, there a time later in the season, maybe even in a few weeks, he may come back to Laval. But what's allowed him to adapt to the pro game so well?
Well, I think it's similar to what Amy said. I think it's that confidence and I'll add like assertiveness. I think especially for defensemen, so often you'll see them come up from the AHL and you can tell they feel they don't belong at the NHL level, right? Like they're just tentative. They're not decisive with the puck. It's almost like they shy away from it sometimes. And I haven't seen that with him. Like he's, kind of a guy that wants to kind of, have the puck on his stick, wants to be involved in the play, wants to kind of press, the play when the situation requires it. And I think that bodes really well, right? Because like confidence is, consistency and confidence, I think, are the two biggest drivers outside of obviously talent that keep players out of the NHL. Like there's a ton of top players in the AHL that just have never quite been able to master that battle of confidence, and that and that goes often hand in hand with consistency. And this is a young player, only 22 years old, who seems to have quite a good grip on that already, and I think that bodes really well for what he can be down the road.
And the fact that he likes to get involved physically doesn't hurt either.
Doesn't hurt.
So before we wrap this up about the prospects in Laval, I wondered if each of you could pick from a prospect we haven't talked about yet. Matthias Norlinder, or William Trudeau, Sean Farrell, Riley Kidney. There's lots to choose from. And Patrick, I'm going to let you make your choice and go first.
Yeah, I'll go with the young forward, Sean Farrell. Coming out 2 years at Harvard, a product of that great Chicago Steel junior program where, he was phenomenal. Also part of the U.S. development program. So, some real good kind of bones to his foundation, right? Like, for a player that's only 22, fourth rounder by the Habs. I'll say on the smaller side, but he thinks the game well. Like he really has that I think ability, that confidence with, again, we're coming back to confidence with the puck, and those are encouraging aspects. Like so many of these players, like, whether you're talking about their skill and their, the skating, I feel like it's almost like that's, for a lot of players these days, that's almost a given. Like, that used to be such a thing for young players, was just getting their skating up to par, to a pro level. Now it's like they all seem to come in and already are excellent skaters. So, I think he's a little stronger on the puck than maybe I realized, sort of at the pro level. So I like I just kind of like what he's doing. Again, I think the caveat with him is it's difficult right now to get a sense kind of where he fits in, kind of the overall context of the AHL, just because there's a lot going on around him. That's, with Laval, that's just, not ideal. I think early on for a guy, who's two months into his pro career, he's gotten some time with the Habs. He's shown some potential with Laval. I think you'd have to, at least at this point, consider it an early success.
And he's a player that back in the lineup on Friday night after a time with out for injury, but he's shown some real good chemistry with Joshua Waugh. And full credit to Canadiens development coach Scott Pellerin, dropped in on practice and said to JF, well, hey, you might want to put the Farrell kid with Joshua Waugh. Now, whether Waugh's kind of quiet period coincided with Farrell being out of the lineup, that's a question. But we'll see if those two end up back together, and two very exciting players when they're on the ice.
And I'm a big fan of what they did with him last year, bringing him up at the end.
Yeah,
giving him some of those games with the Habs, give him a taste of kind of, okay, this is what the NHL is going to be like. This is what you need to do. Send them into the summer with that lesson, and then I think it really set him up well coming into camp this year, and then obviously going into Laval, and getting his really diving into the pro game.
And Kent Hughes has already signaled that they plan to do exactly the same thing when Lane Hutson's season comes to an end. Amy, who do you have that you want to take a look at?
I actually want to take a look at Riley Kidney. Riley Kidney, I think, when it comes speaking of Sean Farrell, I think Sean Farrell and Riley Kidney, a lot of people coming into this season would maybe talk about them in the same sentence. And Farrell might have been a bit more of the dynamic player. Kidney maybe a little more understated. He's a quiet kid. He started the season quietly, kind of almost unnoticeable for the first 6 weeks of the season or so. Usually on the third line, sometimes on the fourth line. And what I've been impressed with is that suddenly, despite the fact that Laval has been struggling the amount that they have, Riley Kidney has found his own way to start making an impression and, quite frankly, start moving himself up the lineup. Riley Kidney has come on with a bit of a scoring touch in the last month or so, where he is, after he scored his first goal of the season, it was almost like he couldn't stop then. He's consistently getting on the score sheet, whether it's goals or assists. And he's putting things together at the right time. You can see that he's starting to kind of put the pieces of, okay, this is what pro hockey is about and how to adapt my game to it. I'll go back to last Friday's game on the road in Lehigh Valley against a Phantoms team that absolutely dominated the game the entire time. The only reason that they were in it was because Dobesh was basically a brick wall in net. And in the final minute of play in regulation, it was Riley Kidney scoring the power play goal, game-winning goal to give them that victory that night. It wasn't, the Gabriel Borks or the Brandon Gignac. It was Riley Kidney who did that. And he has found ways to make himself be an invaluable piece of the puzzle in just about every game that the Laval Rocket has played, even on nights that he's not necessarily scoring or getting an assist. And I think that's a very encouraging sign that Riley Kidney might start to be more of a focus than he was at the beginning of the season.
He's been under the radar, and maybe, as you say, it was due to his quiet start. But 6 goals already, that's only 2 fewer than Joshua Waugh. He, as you said, he scored important goals. When he plays in the middle, he looks poised. His shooting percentage is 14%. I just like to see him shoot more. He's got a great shot, great release. Yeah. And he's starting to figure this all out. Listen, guys, this was absolutely terrific. We've plowed through a quite a bunch of group of prospects, and we're going to have to do this again and check in on Laval's group of prospects later on in the season. For now, I'm just going to say Merry Christmas to Patrick, and you know how important you are to our team, and how much we respect the work that you do, and we feel really fortunate to be able to talk to you and toss ideas and talk hockey every single day. And we're really grateful when you're able to come on the Canadiens Connection and share that knowledge with our listeners.
Well, thank you so much for that, and it's quite mutual, and with both of you, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all of you, and thank you.
It's always a pleasure getting to talk to Patrick, a wealth of information about the AHL and insight, and we appreciate you being here. And as Rick said, Merry Christmas to you as well. It's probably about that time in the show that it's a good time to take our last break. And don't forget, coming up in our third segment, we're going to have the question of the week coming for our listeners. Lots more to come, lots to catch you up on. So we aren't going anywhere yet. We're just going to say, hold on for just a moment. We've got some great messages for you, and we will be back right after this. You are listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
The Canadiens Connection is proud to be a partner of Rocket Sports Media, digital media publishers of sports and entertainment websites. Their mission is to build a worldwide network of sports fans who are informed, engaged, entertained, and connected. Learn more about RSM, its team, and its portfolio of brands at rocketsportsmedia.com. I bet you enjoy sporting your best Habs jerseys, dressing up your kids and pets in the cutest Habs gear, and showing off your decked-out hockey cave or fanning. Well, don't just show your friends, show your Habs. The Rocket Sports Media team wants you to boast your finest pictures for our global network of Montreal Canadiens fans. Include the hashtag #ShowYourHabs when posting your fan photos on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Then log on to showyourhabs.com to see your entries, along with photos and posts from Habs fans all over the world. A proud member of the Rocket Sports Media Network. If you're a business owner looking for the perfect platform to reach a targeted audience of customers, Rocket Sports Media is the solution. Our global hockey community provides unmatched social media reach to an attentive demographic of sports and entertainment fans. We can provide visibility to your company, helping you to engage and leverage this prime group of potential clientele. In addition, we also offer sponsorship opportunities for fan events and featured areas of website content, giving you name and logo recognition. Visit rocketsportsmedia.com to contact us regarding this unique marketing opportunity. For the most trusted source of news, analysis, and features about the Montreal Canadiens, log in to thn.com/Montreal, your year-round source for anything Habs related. That's thn.com/Montreal.
And welcome back to episode 275 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. Don't forget, I've mentioned it before, be sure to follow this podcast at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, visit our website at canadiensconnection.fm. And in this segment, we're going to get to some of your comments. And if you would like to submit your own message, questions, feedback, commentary, anything, remember, you can do that by texting us at any time via the Rocket Sports text line. That is, once again, 5853-ROCKET. Say it with me now, 5853-ROCKET. First and foremost, what you need to know, what you might have missed from the Rocket Sports Media crew across all of our platforms. First and foremost, of course, is our contributions to the Hockey News Montreal team site, the digital platform for the Hockey News. You can find that at thn.com/Montreal. It is all of your Canadiens coverage from the Montreal Canadiens to the Laval Rocket, the Trois-Rivières Lions, and Prospects, all in one place. Just one link, one URL to remember, thn.com/Montreal. You'll also, we've mentioned a couple of times, our YouTube channel. And YouTube is a hopping place for us these days here at Rocket Sports. If you are missing out, if you are not subscribed and checking in daily to our YouTube channel, you are missing out on some really fun content. You can find our YouTube channel, of course, at youtube.com/allhabs. Kicking most recently on Thursday was my latest edition of the Habs Hockey Report show. This one was entitled The Canadiens Christmas Wish List, 5 gifts the Habs must get.
And you got one.
And I mentioned earlier in the show, one of them came true that very night.
What are the other 4?
You got to watch it to find out.
All right.
Got to watch it to find out. Also this week's Rocket Hockey Report that comes out every Tuesday. As I mentioned, Patrick Williams is
everywhere.
a busy man this week. He joined me on that show on YouTube to learn, for our viewers to learn all about new Laval Rocket goaltender Kasimir Kaskisuo. He gave us kind of his in-depth scouting report mostly from when Kaskisuo played those couple of years for the Marlies. And it's that was a really popular episode. Had well over 1,000 views on that. It was really, really well received. As was the latest Canadiens Connection podcast, which comes out. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection. If you're listening on a podcast player, then you know that drops every Saturday. If you're watching it on YouTube, you know that those drop on Mondays on YouTube. And this most recent one from last week, the YouTube video was called "Wasn't Caulfield supposed to score 40 goals this season?" There were certainly some fun comments on that one. So you want to check that out as well. Probably the most exciting thing happening on the channel right now, of course, is the debut this month of our new live game watch-alongs. Those are live streams that members of our Rocket Sports Media team are doing on our YouTube channel, where you get to watch the game alongside of our Rocket Sports Media team members, interact with them, hear their commentary, their play-by-play, their analysis, get to know new fans from all over the world. It's a ton of fun. Michael and Nathan hosted a very fun episode of that on Monday the 18th. That was Montreal against Winnipeg. And so that is available for replay if you want to check out what you might be missing. Because, Rick, there's another one coming up soon.
There's just into the new year. The game is Montreal in Philadelphia, Wednesday, January the 10th, and Michael and Nathan will be back together once again on our YouTube channel, leading this watch along. And yeah, it's very popular. It's lots of fun. Mm-hmm. You get to interact with the host, but also interact with Canadiens fans from right around the world.
Yeah, definitely a ton of fun. And that one's against Philadelphia, so I might need to play poke the bear in the chat a little bit in that one. That could be fun. Also, be sure you have subscribed to this podcast on your favorite podcast app, CanadiensConnection.fm. You can find all of the places that it's available there as well. You know, it's really your inside link to the Montreal Canadiens. You don't ever want to miss an episode. It's everything all packaged in one neat little podcast that comes out every week. You don't want to miss a single episode of it, so be sure you're subscribed. And Rick, really, the big message from all of us this week is just Merry Christmas to all of our listeners and viewers. It's a wonderful time of year. It's hard to believe it's here already, but just wishing everyone a really happy holiday season and a very Merry Christmas.
Everyone who goes to the Hockey News website to read our articles, goes to YouTube to watch the videos or listen to this podcast, we're very grateful. We've been doing this now for 15 years, and we know that we have built up a following of people who are very loyal. For that, we're very grateful. We're grateful that you share it with your friends and fellow Canadiens fans. And I just also want to say a Merry Christmas to our Rocket Sports team, who are incredible people, fun to work with, and who make an incredible sacrifice to bring the information just because they're so passionate about hockey and about the Montreal Canadiens.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas all around. Don't forget, though, we want to hear from you on the Canadiens Connection question of the week. Be sure to let us know what has been your favorite hockey-themed Christmas present, like ever. Could have been from when you were a kid, could have been from yesterday. We just want to know, what is your favorite hockey-themed Christmas present? We love hearing from our listeners and our viewers. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, we love sharing some of those best comments with all of you every week. And as I said, Rick, our channel has been just hopping with all sorts of activity. And in the last couple of weeks, there have been dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens of comments on all of our content. And there was some pretty interesting ones. I will say a thank you. I will specifically say a thank you to Leo. Leo likes to send in emails to Rick sometimes. Our friend Leo, he has jumped in on the live stream stuff a little bit, and he's been leaving some comments on our regular content as well. So thank you, Leo. We appreciate all of your feedback.
And, I said Habs fans are everywhere. Leo from St. Petersburg, Russia.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Rick, I know that we talked a bit about Kasimir Kaskisuo and the Rocket Hockey Report that came out on Tuesday. I did say it was a very popular episode. And let me tell you what, Kaz, with his presence on YouTube as it is, he's got a very devoted following, and they showed up on our channel as well. We had a lot of great comments all over the spectrum a little bit about Kasimir Kaskisuo, but this one I found one of the most interesting. This is from Rusty Clutch 8632. He says, "Here for the Kaz news. I've been watching his YouTube channel since the bubble, behind the scenes, goalie cam, day in the life, great stuff." Here's the kicker in his comment. "As a Leafs fan, he's conflicted. He says, but if I got to cheer for a Habs franchise to cheer for Kaz, I'm going to have to do it." Well.
All right then.
And he's not the only Leafs fan who jumped into the comments to say something similar, that, hey, I'm a Leafs fan, but I'm here to support Kaz even if he is with a Habs franchise. So pretty fun stuff.
We have comments related to our show last week. We had Dr. Stephen Morris on talking about Alex Newhook and talking about Cole Caulfield and what are the reasons for Caulfield's struggles this season. There was lots expected of him, particularly his 26 goals in 46 games, the pace in which he scored last season. So expectations were that he'd be getting 40 goals, 45 goals. Some predicted 50 goals for Cole Caulfield. He's nowhere near that pace, just 8 goals. And not to, I think maybe some people misinterpreted the intent. We were looking for reasons, not to lay blame necessarily. And Dr. Stephen Morris came in and talked about the surgery that Cole Caulfield had on his shoulder and, whether some patience is needed maybe as he gets back to 100%. There were some fans who said, chill, the season's early, season's young. Not so much. We're well past the 1/3 mark of the season. Some said, hey, listen, Ovechkin is struggling. He's in a slump. So Cole Caulfield's in a slump. I think that kind of Cole Caulfield isn't anywhere. The most goals he's scored in any season in the National Hockey League is 26. So let's not make those comparisons just yet. On the YouTube channel, Boosh is on the Loosh 702 says, Cole stays close on the left side, waiting for the team to dig out the puck and pass it over to him for a one-timer. Nowadays, there's always a player close, trying to intercept or prevent the puck somehow from getting to Caulfield. They watch tape.
Obviously.
They do pregame prep. So the power play has to compromise. And in all of that, he's talking about the power play, and there's been a lot of criticism of the tactics of Alex Burrows. Bush goes on to say, I didn't even touch on his 5-on-5 play because it's virtually non-existent. He's had trouble scoring 5-on-5.
He definitely has.
Galcan FTW says, as of a week ago, Cole and Nick only had 2 and 3 goals, respectively. 5-on-5. Newhook, who's injured, had 4 or 5 himself at 5-on-5. This team is full of soft perimeter players that will always be inconsistent and rely mostly on power plays to get more freedom and space to operate. What I've noticed is players are trying too hard to set up Cole and giving up their own scoring chances. What Cole does well is elevate his shots in close, but in my opinion, he is only effective from about 15 to 20 feet, does not have a power shot that can score from the blue line. Well, we talked about power, we talked about accuracy, we talked about all of the physical characteristics that are required for a shot with Dr. Morris last week. You might want to go and listen to episode 274.
Very good. Very, very good.
Well, what's also very good is your work with the YouTube channel, all over, but with the YouTube channel. And Center Ice 7948 says, Merry Christmas, Amy. I have so much respect for your professionalism. You do such a great job. One of my favorites with integrity. My wish list, I want Arbor back and for us to clean out the rest of the dead weight. Start trading.
Start trading. That's
Ken
right.
Hughes. So a really nice comment.
Very nice comment.
Merry Christmas to Center Heist.
Thank you very much. He's another one who watches pretty much all of our content on the YouTube channel and comments quite frequently. So we appreciate your viewership and your support as well. Thank you very much for those kind words. All right. Well, coming up this week for the Canadiens, before the next show here for the Canadiens Connection, there's just one. It is just Montreal's visit to the Carolina Hurricanes. That's on Thursday, December 28th. And then after that, 2 days later, we'll be back with another Canadiens Connection episode on Saturday, December 30th. You get me again. Michael Spinella will be wrapping up his holiday travels at that point. So I will be back guest hosting, keeping his seat warm for him with Rick Stevens, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it too. Thank you for today, and look forward to you being back next week.
Absolutely. Don't forget, subscribe to the Canadiens Connection on your favorite podcast app, share it on social media, and thank you once again. Merry Christmas to all of you. Thanks for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.